Hey everyone. So the Ted Wells report on the New England Patriots Deflategate is out. And I've bitten my tongue now for a few days about the report, but I feel a need to offer my own perspective on it, and I'm going to be fairly critical of it. My first criticism of the report is kind of a broad meta criticism, and it goes like this. In a regular court case, a whole bunch of people come and provide evidence, whether it's a civil case or a criminal case. You've got policemen, you've got detectives, you've got other investigators, you've got forensics experts, and they all offer evidence that they generally think is compelling. However, once they offer their evidence, it's up to a third party to decide the value of that evidence, whether it's a jury, whether it's a judge. Somebody else determines whether that information is convincing and compelling. Now let's contrast that with a Ted Wells type investigation. Wells is the lead investigator. He writes the report. He aggregates all the information that other people provide. And then ultimately, he passes judgment on his own evidence. So here you've got a guy who's a high-priced lawyer who's being paid millions and millions of dollars, top dollar I'm sure, who investigates for 3 months. If he comes back and he says, well, we looked at 1 million different data points and we can't really find anything conclusive to show that footballs were doctored, and we can't show conclusively that Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, or anybody else had any knowledge of doctoring of footballs, the football world goes crazy. You know, he's dealing with a very skeptical and impatient public. I would submit to you that the pressure on him to come up with something that sounds halfway conclusive is enormous. He needs to come up with something that at least sounds halfway definitive, or he's going to have egg on his face after a 3-month investigation. If he doesn't, people are going to either say he's in the pocket of the Patriots, or he's a lousy investigator, or at the very least, you know, he was a waste of time and money and didn't know what he was doing. So I would suggest to you there's an inherent conflict of interest here. There's an inherent tendency for him to want to, if you'll pardon the expression, inflate his findings to make it sound like the investigation produced something. And so here's what he came up with. And, you know, we've all heard this, but I'm going to repeat it. It is more probable than not that Tom Brady, the quarterback of the Patriots, was at least generally aware of the inappropriate activities of locker room attendant McNally and equipment manager Yastrzemski involving the release of air from Patriots game balls. Now, I find this to be an incredibly mealy-mouthed, vague, and very unconvincing conclusion to come out of this report. Tom Brady wasn't aware, he was generally aware. And he doesn't come out and say, Tom Brady knew that locker room attendant Jim McNally absconded with a bag of footballs, went into a bathroom for 90 seconds, pulled out a needle, and deflated 11 of 12 footballs. He just says he was aware of inappropriate activities. Now, I think it is more probable than not that something happened, that McNally did doctor the footballs. But as I read the report, I can't find a shred of evidence that Tom Brady knew about doctoring of the footballs. Now, people say, well, you know, they would never have deflated footballs if they didn't think Tom Brady wanted that. Tom Brady had made it clear that he liked his footballs at the low end of the allowable spectrum. That was absolutely clear. So they knew that. But there's no evidence that Tom Brady ever said to anybody, after the refs checked the balls, run off with the balls to a bathroom and tamper with them. That would have been an incredibly crazy thing for Tom Brady to suggest, because the risk would have been infinitely greater than any benefit he could have gotten. Now, in order to understand this report, interestingly, we have to go back to a football game that was played not in January when the when the Colts and the Patriots played, but in October when the Patriots played the New York Jets. That was a very close game, with the Patriots finally winning 27-25. But what was interesting about the game is that Tom Brady was very unhappy with the footballs he was throwing in that game and made it clear. Now let me set the stage here. John Yastrzemski is the equipment manager, and Jim McNally is the locker room attendant. Both of these guys have a role to play in the preparation of balls for Tom Brady. So at halftime of the Jets game, Yastrzemski sends a text to McNally. Tom is acting crazy about the balls, ready to vomit. The response, he's saying they're not good enough? Tell you later. So the next day, Yastrzemski sends another text. Tom was right. I just measured some of the balls. They were supposed to be 13 pounds. They were like 16, felt like bricks. McNally says, Tom sucks. I'm going to make that next ball a fucking balloon. Yastrzemski, talked to him last night. He actually brought you up and said you must have a lot of stress trying to get them done. I told him he was right though. I checked some of the balls this morning. The refs fucked us. A few of them were almost 16. They didn't recheck them after they put air in them. McNally, fuck Tom. 16 is nothing. Wait till next Sunday. Oh my God. So here you have, essentially you've got Beavis and Butthead sending text messages to each other here. These are the guys that Tom Brady is presumed to be in cahoots with to doctor balls. And one of the interesting things about this exchange is it's clear that they never had any sense that anybody would ever be viewing these text messages. Because if they did, they'd be fired immediately. But there's not any suggestion here that Tom Brady was asking them to do anything illegal. Tom Brady wanted his balls the way he wanted his balls. And when he got balls that this guy eventually measured as weighing 16, as being inflated to 16 pounds, he was upset, which is perfectly appropriate and perfectly expected for a perfectionist like Tom Brady. A few days later, they're still angry at Brady because he's criticized their ball preparation. McNally, make sure you blow up the ball to look like a rugby ball so Tom can get used to it before Sunday. The other guy says, oh my God. Can't wait to give you your needle this week. Fuck Tom. Make sure the pump is attached to the needle. Fucking watermelon's coming. So angry. The only thing deflating Sunday is his passing rating. Now, yes, they're talking about deflating the ball, but Tom has said that he wants his balls at the low end of the allowable spectrum. He wants them at 12.5. The allowable spectrum is 12.5 to 13.5. There is not one text in here that suggests that Tom is saying, hey, sneak away with balls and underinflate them if you get a chance. Not one email. These exchanges are completely uncensored. I mean, they have no notion that anybody would possibly be reading this stuff later on. Now, after the game between the Patriots and the Colts, the playoff game, there is a record of Tom texting Yastrzemski, the equipment manager, and arranging meetings with him. But that's after the game. There's no evidence of any meetings or texts between them before the game. I suspect that after the game, when the uproar began, the first thought of Tom Brady was, what the hell happened? I mean, I'm sure he wanted to talk to both of those guys to find out what was going on so that he would be up to speed, because people are obviously bombarding him with questions. But I can't find any evidence provided by Ted Wells that Tom Brady knew or was engaged in any conspiracy with these guys to underinflate the balls. Now, it is clear that locker room attendant Jim McNally did take the balls unauthorized and went to the men's room. It's not 100% clear that he did anything with them in the men's room, but I'm willing to accept the idea that it is more probable than not that he did something. He may have found a moment when there was nobody around and seized the opportunity. But there's no way that Tom Brady would have known about that in advance or would have authorized it. Now, there's one other interesting thing to be critical about with respect to the Wells report, and that's the research company that they hired to do their testing. Obviously, they weren't doing the testing themselves. They hired a firm called Exponent, an organization that does scientific research. The best way to describe Exponent is they're a legal hired gun. They're the kind of research company that you hire when you know that they'll give you the results that you're looking for. This is the same outfit that came to the conclusion that cigarettes don't cause cancer, that asbestos doesn't cause mesothelioma, that Chevron wasn't contaminating anybody when it dumped oil waste. Companies that know the kind of results they're looking for hire Exponent. Now, with a reputation like that, why would you hire this company? So my conclusion from the report is that it is thin porridge. I'm not convinced that the Patriots are completely innocent in all this, but I can find nothing compelling in the Ted Wells report that would compel me as the commissioner of the NFL to issue a heavy penalty against them. It's just not there in the report. You've got Beavis and Butthead acting up, and you've got Tom Brady. The only evidence is that Tom Brady liked his inflation pressure at the low end of the spectrum. That doesn't mean that he participated in a conspiracy, and there's no evidence of a conspiracy. Perhaps the biggest implication from Ted Wells' conclusions is that Tom Brady would be a complete idiot, because you'd have to be an idiot to get in cahoots with these two guys. If you look at their text messages and just sort of look at the general level of stupidity of what they're saying to one another, the notion that Tom Brady would huddle with them would be mind-boggling to me. So when you hear folks like Keith Olbermann, who, is in a constant state of hysteria about one issue or another, suggesting that Tom Brady should be suspended for a year, either take it with a grain of salt or go ahead and read the report yourself, because you're going to find that there's far less in the report than meets the eye. I'll be interested to see what Roger Goodell does with it. Thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Rowan.